Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every woman's life when silence breaks, not because the world suddenly starts listening, but because she finally starts speaking to herself, loudly, honestly, fiercely. She looked in the mirror one day, not the kind on her wall, but the mirror within, and in that reflection she didn't see weakness, she didn't see failure, she didn't see heartbreak, betrayal, insecurity, or rejection. She saw power, potential, fire, because she remembered who she was, and when she did, the game changed. Not just the game people were playing around her, the game she was playing too. No more shrinking to fit into rooms that were never built for her. No more smiling through disrespect. No more twisting herself into someone's version of enough. She stopped waiting to be chosen. She chose herself. She started saying no without guilt. She set boundaries like gates, not walls, because she knew not everyone deserves access. She stopped romanticizing red flags, stopped thinking love meant sacrifice, and realized peace is more valuable than approval. They said she was too much. She said, no, I was just never meant to be small. She stopped apologizing for her ambition, her voice, her laugh, her style, her dreams. Because she understood something the world had tried to make her forget. A woman who knows her worth is unstoppable. She walked away from places that dimmed her light. She stood tall in boardrooms where she used to whisper. She turned pain into power, setbacks into setups, rejections into redirection, and here's the thing about a woman like that: when she rises, she doesn't rise alone. She builds, she uplifts, she rewrites the rules so that other women no longer have to ask for permission to lead. She remembered who she was, not the version shaped by society or expectations or heartbreak, the version that was born to lead, love, create, conquer. And when that memory came flooding back, not softly, but like a thunderclap, the game didn't just change. It exploded. So if you are still questioning your worth, if you're still waiting for the world to validate your existence, stop, look in the mirror, not the one on your wall, the one in your soul. Remember who you are, then rise, because once you do, the game won't stand a chance. Would you like a long version e.g. 15-20 minutes SEO, friendly YouTube description, or hashtags for this? There's a moment, silent, invisible to the outside world, when a woman pauses in the chaos of her life and looks inward. Everything around her may still look the same routine, the same people, the same responsibilities. But something inside her shifts. It's not loud, it doesn't scream, it whispers, a quiet reminder deep in her bones: you are more than this. That's the beginning. That whisper is the spark. It's the first flicker of self-realization, the kind that doesn't need anyone else's permission to grow louder. And once she hears it, really hears it, she can't unhear it. She starts to reflect on everything she's been through. The times she settled because she thought she had no choice. The times she played small just to keep the peace. The times she waited to be chosen, validated, understood. The world had taught her to doubt herself, to put others first, to feel guilty for wanting more. But something changes when she realizes she doesn't have to carry those lessons anymore. She is allowed to choose differently now. She is allowed to rewrite the narrative. She begins to reclaim her identity. Piece by piece, memory by memory, strength by strength. She remembers the dreams she put on hold. She remembers the fire she used to feel before life tried to put it out. She remembers the sound of her own laughter, unfiltered and full. She remembers the confidence that didn't need an audience to feel real. And the more she remembers, the more alive she feels, the more powerful she becomes. This kind of self-realization isn't about ego. It's not arrogance, it's awakening. It's returning to a self that was buried beneath roles and responsibilities. It's unlearning everything that convinced her she wasn't enough. It's seeing clearly for the first time after years of walking through fog. And it's not that the world suddenly becomes easier, it's that she becomes stronger, more grounded, unshakable. People around her may not even notice it at first, but eventually they feel the shift. She stops over-explaining. She stops apologizing for existing. She doesn't rush to fill silences with justification. She no longer begs to be seen, because she sees herself, and when a woman sees herself clearly, everything around her is forced to adjust. People either rise to meet her truth or they fall away, but she doesn't chase anymore. That's not her job. This realization brings discomfort. Growth always does, but she doesn't fear it. She welcomes it. Because she finally understands that peace is not found in pleasing others. It's found in honoring herself, in speaking the truth she once swallowed, in walking away when something doesn't feel right. In saying yes to the life that aligns with her soul, not just her survival, she begins to show up differently in relationships, in conversations, in decisions, not louder, not harsher, just real, authentic. Rooted, and that energy is powerful, that energy shifts dynamics, that energy attracts abundance, respect, clarity. She no longer needs the world to recognize her worth. She already knows it, and that knowledge is enough to change everything. Because once a woman remembers who she is, not the broken version, not the diminished one, but the whole wild, beautiful force she was always meant to be, there's no going back. That's when the game changes. Not just for her, for everyone watching her rise. She stopped waiting, not because she gave up, but because she finally understood the truth. No one was coming to choose her, fix her, save her, or validate her. And she didn't need them to. For too long, she had poured her energy into being enough for other people, enough to be loved, enough to be accepted, enough to be wanted. She twisted herself into versions she didn't recognize just to fit into spaces she had outgrown. But then, one day, something inside her woke up, a quiet, rebellious voice that said, "Why are you waiting for someone else to see your light when you can switch it on yourself?" From that moment, she made a decision. A simple, powerful, life-altering decision. I choose me, not the version of herself that was always exhausted from proving, not the version trying to meet everyone else's expectations. She chose the version that had been buried underneath years of self-doubt, the bold one, the wild one, the unapologetic one. Choosing herself didn't mean she stopped loving others. It meant she stopped abandoning herself to do it. It meant no more begging for breadcrumbs when she could bake her own table, no more shrinking in the presence of people who couldn't handle her brilliance, no more tolerating half-hearted efforts, confusing signals, or people who only came around when it was convenient. She started saying no without explaining. She started walking away without guilt. She stopped chasing conversations that always left her feeling empty. She stopped bending her boundaries to accommodate people who had no intention of respecting them. And it wasn't easy. Choosing yourself never is, but the peace it brought, that was priceless. Every time she stood up for herself, she got stronger. Every time she didn't respond to chaos, she became clearer. Every time she made herself a priority, the world began to reflect that back. Because that's how it works. When you respect yourself deeply, others learn how to treat you, and those who don't, they simply fade away. No fight, no drama, just space for something better. She no longer waited to be picked in love, work, or life. She created opportunities, she made moves, she stopped asking for permission and started taking up space. Not because she was trying to prove anything, but because she finally remembered she was worthy all along. Worthy of more than being an option, worthy of more than second thoughts, worthy of being her own greatest love story. And the more she chose herself, the more magnetic she became. Confidence has a pulse. It can be felt, and hers was unmistakable, not the kind that needs to be loud or flashy, the kind that radiates from within. Quiet, strong, rooted, real, choosing herself wasn't a one-time act. It was a daily commitment, a vow to never abandon her needs, her truth, her energy again, a promise to walk away from anything that made her question her value. She didn't need the world to crown her queen. She put the crown on herself, and in that choice, in that bold, fearless, revolutionary choice to finally pick herself, the game changed. She began to understand that peace was more precious than attention, more valuable than being liked, more important than being understood by people who had no intention of truly knowing her. So she did something radical. She set boundaries. Not as punishment, not as walls to keep the world out, but as acts of self-respect. She drew lines where there used to be blurred spaces, where people had taken advantage of her kindness, her silence, her loyalty. And she didn't apologize for it. She didn't over-explain or seek approval. Because for the first time she realized that protecting her energy wasn't selfish, it was survival. She stopped answering messages that drained her. She stopped saying yes when her soul whispered no. She stopped making herself available to people who only reached out when they needed something. She finally saw how many times she had tolerated disrespect just to keep the peace, how often she had kept quiet to avoid conflict, how many chances she had given to people who didn't even value her presence. And she was done, not bitter, not angry, just done. People started noticing, the ones who had been used to her overextending, overgiving, overcaring. They didn't like the new her. They called her cold, changed, difficult, but she wasn't being difficult. She was being clear. She was no longer accessible to chaos. She had learned that her peace was too expensive to trade for temporary approval. She didn't want to be the girl who kept fixing everything while breaking herself in the process. There's a kind of power that comes when a woman stops explaining her standards, when she no longer fears losing people who don't value her. That power is not loud, it's calm, it's not defensive, it's certain. She no longer begged to be chosen. She no longer tried to fit into places that made her feel small. She created her own space, a space that felt safe, where her peace wasn't negotiable, and sure, some people walked away. That was expected, because the truth is, boundaries don't push the right people away. They only filter out those who were never meant to stay. She didn't mourn those losses for long. Her soul was too full, too rested, too grounded to chase what wasn't aligned anymore. She used to confuse love with sacrifice. She thought proving her loyalty meant tolerating everything, but now she knew better. She understood that real love honors boundaries. Real connections don't ask you to betray yourself. She started attracting different people, people who didn't flinch when she said no, people who respected her time, her energy, her truth. She found herself again, not in the noise, not in the crowd, but in the quiet strength of choosing herself over and over. Her boundaries weren't barriers, they were bridges to a better life, deeper relationships, and a stronger version of herself. And that's when everything began to shift, not because others changed, but because she did. Because once she raised her standards and honored her peace, the universe responded. The game changed, not out of revenge or spite, but out of self-respect, out of the deep, unshakable knowing that her soul was worth protecting. Always she stopped hiding, not because the world became kinder, but because she became braver. For too long she had diluted herself to fit into boxes that weren't made for her. She tried to mold herself into what others found palatable, softer, quieter, less intense, more agreeable. She played the part society wanted her to play. Smile more, want less, don't outshine, don't outgrow. But inside her, there was always this voice whispering, "This isn't all you are." And finally, one day, she listened. Not out of rage, not out of rebellion, but out of truth. She realized she was never meant to fit in. She was meant to stand out, and so she made a choice. No more pretending, no more performing, no more shape-shifting to be accepted. She started showing up as herself, fully and unapologetically. She laughed louder, spoke her truth, wore what she wanted, dreamed without limits. She reclaimed parts of herself she had buried beneath politeness and fear, her ambition, her power, her emotions, her voice. She didn't wait for the world to say it was okay to be who she was. She gave herself permission. It wasn't easy. Authenticity always costs something. Some people pulled away. Some didn't understand her anymore. Some said she was too much, too confident, too emotional, too bold. But she didn't shrink back. She understood now that being too much for the wrong people just meant she was finally being enough for herself. She stopped performing for approval. She stopped living for likes, compliments, validation. She knew her worth wasn't tied to her appearance, her relationship status, or her ability to keep everyone comfortable. It was rooted in her essence, in the fire that had survived every storm, in the wisdom that came from every broken piece she had gathered and put back together, in the freedom of being real even when it made others uncomfortable. Authenticity became her compass. She trusted her intuition over people's opinions. She chose passion over perfection, truth over tradition. She no longer chased roles that confined her or narratives that erased her. She wrote her own story in her own language, on her own terms, and something magical happened. As she embraced her truth, life began to align. She started attracting real connections, people who celebrated her light instead of competing with it. Opportunities flowed where resistance used to live. She found peace in being misunderstood because she was finally understood by herself. Her life stopped being about proving anything. It became about living everything. Feeling deeply, loving honestly, dreaming wildly, failing openly, rising consistently, there was no longer a mask to hold up, no script to follow, just her, all radiant, real. She didn't need everyone to love her. She just needed to love herself enough to be fully seen. And in that choice to show up authentically, the world around her shifted, not because she asked it to, but because the moment she became her true self, the game couldn't continue the way it had before. Everything changed, and she wouldn't have it any other way. She had every reason to quit. Every failure, every heartbreak, every closed door could have been the end of her story. She had been overlooked, underestimated, used, doubted, and dismissed. There were moments she broke down, nights she cried silently, mornings she didn't want to rise. She had given her heart to the wrong people, her time to the wrong paths, and her energy to the wrong fights. But somehow she didn't stop. She didn't crumble into pieces that stayed broken. Instead, she took every single scar and turned it into a source of strength. She didn't just survive, she transformed. Because she finally understood something no one had taught her. Pain is not the enemy, it's the teacher. Every setback had been a lesson. Every rejection was a redirection. Every loss, a clearing of space for something greater. The universe wasn't punishing her, it was preparing her, but she could only see that once she stopped asking why me, and started asking what now. She didn't numb the pain, she sat with it, faced it, felt it fully, let it tear her open, and in that rawness, that discomfort, that honesty, she found herself. The strongest version of herself didn't come from ease. It came from getting back up after being knocked down over and over again. It came from walking through the fire and realizing it couldn't burn what was meant to rise. She stopped being ashamed of what she'd been through. She stopped hiding her wounds as if they were weakness. They were proof that she fought, proof that she grew, proof that she didn't give up when it would have been easier to stay down. She carried her pain like armor, not baggage. It no longer defined her, it refined her. She began to own her story, not just the highlight reel, but all of it. The messy parts, the mistakes, the things that nearly broke her. She spoke her truth so others would know they weren't alone. She turned her healing into her power. She became the woman who could look another in the eye and say, I've been there, and I made it. There's a unique glow in someone who's been through hell and came back wiser. It can't be faked, it can't be taught. And she wore it effortlessly, not to impress anyone, but to remind herself who she had become. Not bitter, not broken, but unshakably resilient. Her pain didn't stop her, it sculpted her. It burned away the illusions and left only what was real: courage, clarity, and a deep sense of purpose. And with every step she took forward, she proved that strength isn't in never falling. It's in rising, braver, wiser, louder, every single time. The game changed because she stopped letting pain hold her back and started letting it propel her forward. She used what was meant to break her as fuel, and now she walks with a fire in her eyes, a softness in her heart, and a truth in her voice that no one can deny. She didn't just rise for herself, she rose for every woman who's ever been silenced, doubted, or made to feel small. Because the moment she remembered who she was, she realized she had a responsibility greater than her own success. She understood that her voice, her strength, her journey could become a lifeline for someone else still stuck in the dark. So she chose to stand tall, not just as a symbol of her own growth, but as a reminder of what's possible for others. Her rise became a ripple effect. She didn't gatekeep her healing. She shared her story openly and honestly. Not for attention, but for impact. She knew that vulnerability had power, that her truth could be someone else's turning point. She spoke about the nights she doubted herself, the moments she wanted to give up, the times she felt invisible. And in doing so, she gave other women permission to feel, to break, and most importantly, to rebuild. She showed them that rising isn't reserved for the lucky or the fearless. It's for anyone willing to choose themselves, even when it hurts. She never claimed to be perfect. She wasn't trying to be a hero. She was simply a woman who had decided that enough was enough. Enough settling, enough shrinking, enough silence, and that choice to rise became a beacon. Her courage reminded others of their own. Her strength gave language to others' pain. Her confidence lit a path for others to follow. She celebrated other women's wins without envy. She lifted those around her, even when she was still climbing herself. Because she knew that real power doesn't compete, it uplifts. She saw beauty in collaboration over comparison, in connection over competition. She didn't just want to succeed alone. She wanted to bring others with her. To create space, to open doors, to pass the mic, she started mentoring, teaching, guiding, sometimes with words, often with action. She became the woman she once needed, the one who walks into a room and makes everyone else stand taller, the one who sees potential in others before they see it in themselves, the one who speaks life into those who have forgotten how powerful they are. She became living proof that one woman's rise can shift the entire atmosphere. That when a woman chooses herself, she gives others the courage to do the same. Her journey wasn't just about healing or growing. It was about transforming the space around her so that other women wouldn't have to fight so hard